Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Bob Cates. I am the chair of Canadian Friends of Peace Now Toronto District or Toronto chapter. And also you see on your screen Yonatan Mizrachi and Tamara Salpeter. The way today's session is going to work is that we will give a brief introduction, then Yoni will do a lot of the speaking, and then we'll turn it over to questions. Canadian Friends of Peace Now is a partner with Peace Now, Shalom Ashav, in Israel. Shalom Ashav is the leading peace organization in Israel, the oldest, the most established, and hopefully an inspiration to a lot of other peace organizations that have developed since then. And Peace Now and Canadian Friends of Peace Now are strongly committed to a two-state solution. You can find out more on our website, peacenowcanada.org. And we hope that as you watch this webinar, you will consider supporting us with a donation. You can make it through our website, you can mail it, just about anything. And we are entirely dependent on donations for everything we do. And I'll comment on a moment on one of the most important things that our donations are doing this year. The way we're going to structure it is the first half, we're going to principally be listening to Yoni give his overview. I'll be asking a few prompting questions, but really you're going to be hearing Yoni. And then we're going to ask people to submit questions through the Q&A feature on your screen. And Tamara will consolidate the questions and read them, and Yona will answer. Be sure to use the Q&A because we can't hear you or see you otherwise. The webinar will be recorded. If anybody who misses it can get it on our website starting tomorrow. Our guest today is Yonatan Mizrachi. He is co-director of Peace Now's Settlement Watch program. Before he joined Peace Now, he had a long history of activism, including executive director of Emek, I'm going to mispronounce this badly, of Emek Shaveh, an NGO working to prevent exploitation of archaeology in the Israeli-Palestinian Middle East. And just before I introduce Yoni, I'd like to make just a few more brief comments. When we're discussing Peace Now, we may say Peace Now or we may say Shalom Ashav. It's the same thing, just the Hebrew name for it, and we use them interchangeably. When we talk about Settlement Watch, we have a very special interest. Canadian Friends of Peace Now is one of the funders of Settlement Watch, and probably the largest single chunk of what we spend money on this year and in future is to support Settlement Watch. So what Yoni's doing is extremely important to us, and if you're impressed with it, your donations will help us all the more. Finally, just before a couple of months ago, as we were discussing webinars and who to invite, and we looked forward to Yoni, we thought it would be all about Settlement Watch. Then 7th of October came, there was a crisis. And so today, yes, questions about Settlement Watch are germane, welcome, and encouraged, but Yoni's prepared to talk about anything to do with Peace Now, the 7th of October, Israel's reaction, the prospects of peace, and just about anything else that you have to talk about. So we're stretching him a little bit, but please feel free to ask. So what I'm going to do now is to turn it over to Yoni. I'm going to ask a first leading question, and hopefully you will answer whatever you feel you can do. How has Peace Now responded to the 7th of October massacre and the ensuing war with Hamas? What has it been like, both from your personal perspective and from the organization's perspective?
Okay, so first of all, thank you for inviting me, obviously, for this discussion, and thank you, Bob and Tamara and everybody that joined us. So I guess there's obviously the personal perspective and the organization perspective when this war came. And I want to say that I think one thing that we kind of all sharing here in Israel is that I'm saying that we are still in a stage of shock. I mean, we were very surprised from what happened in the October 7. I mean, the scale of the massacre, the brutality of the massacre, if you want to say as well. And we were very surprised. And I'm not sure that we really understanding even now what happened, how it's happened, and things like that. And I think that we are still, and this is something that I'm always saying that we have to remember where we stand when we're trying to think how to react to that. Now, obviously, I mean, for many Israelis, we have like friends in this area, if in the kibbutzim in this area, some of us have friends that were injured or were taken, like were kidnapped. I mean, we all like know people who know people or people who were in the front line. So it makes it very personal. In peace now, and I think that like you said, Bob, before that, we definitely were very much focused in the West Bank. And I think that was what was very much changed. We were focused very much in the West Bank. I think in Israel, we had the feeling, okay, the Gaza Strip is somewhere behind, or which not relevant to the political conflict, we can say. Solve problems, some people thought. And I think that sadly, that was the way for us to understand that actually the Gaza Strip is part of the conflict, very, very much part of the conflict. I don't want to begin with a lot of political statement, but it also, at least personally, and I think also for Peace Now, actually strengthens our understanding that supporting extremist groups is not a positive idea, let's put it this way, in this region. And we couldn't avoid of the fact that no one ever thought that Hamas is a partner, and actually, let's say, strengthening this party in the West Bank was definitely a big mistake. In the same time, again, I said in the beginning, but we were very in shock when we saw the brutality, the scale of the killing, the fact that, you know, young kids, women, everybody were killed with no mercy. So it's kind of, again, it's kind of, and you know, it was not an easy situation since then. Maybe now, after a month, we are a bit more trying to understand what we should do now, how we should lead what should be our next steps or something like that. This is where we're standing now.
Do you have a next step envisioned, or?
Well, I think that I remember that in the first days after the massacre and the war that began immediately, people say we cannot mention the word peace. And I have the feeling, or I hope that my feeling is correct, that a month after the brutality massacre happened, we understand that we at least have to talk about a political solution. After, you know, the fog of all the brutality sinking a bit, we understand that eventually we are living here like maybe 7 million Israelis with 7 million Palestinians, and we eventually have to find a way to live. And again, the first few days was very difficult because also, like, personally, if we're talking about personally, so also my Palestinian friends had like a different perspective about what happened. And slowly, we start to understand that it's not an easy situation to both sides, but still I have the feeling that many people understand that we cannot continue with this kind of violent circles. And I want to say, I don't want to say that it will sound like cliche, but I definitely have the feeling that eventually the majority of the Palestinians and the Israelis were so afraid of the massacre and of the killing that maybe now they are more willing to raise the voice that the killing is enough. That's what I believe, and I see more and more actually.
Hope so. I have a couple of very specific things that are on everybody's mind. First of all, do you think that Israel has done enough to avoid civilian casualties? Or I should say the IDF has done enough to avoid civilian casualties. And I'm also concerned about some of the very inflammatory rhetoric where people say we're not going to use precision surgical strikes anymore.
One of the things that I noticed during these circles of wars, because it's not the first military operation in Gaza Strip, people say the last, I don't know, but what we do see that from one military circle to another, there's more, let's say, non-armed people who've been injured and been killed in this kind of military operations from both sides. I mean, that's what we see all the time. Unfortunately, these numbers are raising every event. Like, I don't know if Israel is doing enough or not, but it's definitely, I mean, we see it again in both sides that so many kids, so many women, so many people who are not involved are being killed. The feeling I have is that obviously you can do more. Again, I'm not a military expert, so I don't know how the situation is in Gaza Strip. Personally, I've been in Gaza. The last time I've been in Gaza Strip was in the beginning of the 90s, so I don't really remember a lot from that. So I don't know. I hope that eventually every soldier thinks that his role is to fight the Hamas and not to fight the Palestinians. That's what I hope. And Bob, you're on mute now.
So one of the big issues that people are discussing is the primacy of freeing the hostages or pursuing the war in Gaza City. How does Peace Now view the importance of freeing hostages?
Well, I think that first of all, let's say in the peace camp, which is eventually the peace camp is very kind of in the front of the voices of saying that we must free the hostages first of all. And the life of the hostages are the most important life that we can save now. They're still alive. At the same time, you can say we can always kill later if you want to call it that way. And this is a very strong voice that still exists among the Israeli public. I don't know how many of the Israelis, by the way, but definitely, let's say the left or the Israeli peace camp in Israel definitely calling for this kind of bring back the hostages. There was a big demonstration yesterday in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and other places. And I think this is very important. Now, when it comes to Peace Now and other peace organizations are not directly involved in this camp. One of the reasons is because we think that it should be cross like a political opinion, like it shouldn't be only excluded to the Israeli left. The demand to bring back the hostages should be demand of the whole public. It should be beyond any political opinion. I cannot say that it's really like I cannot say that everybody in the Israeli public are supporting that, but I still have the feeling that the majority of the Israelis would like to see the hostages coming back. In the same time, I must say that situation when the hostages are not coming back will have a major effect on the Israeli society. It's something that as Israelis that established Israel to protect us from anything like that, I think I am afraid that if it will not happen, it will have a lot of effect on our society and how we trust our relationship between the state and the civilians in general.
Another question that has been coming up is allowing aid into Gaza. And there's been argument, is Israel preventing aid from getting in? Is Egypt preventing aid from getting in? Do you feel that Israel is doing enough to get aid into civilians in Gaza?
Well, in Israel you have everywhere, but especially in Israel you hear mainly the Israeli media. But I'm also talking to a lot of my Palestinian friends, and I also watch the Palestinian media. And I'm saying that because in Israel, we usually don't see the footages of the Palestinian refugees today, okay? Those who live in Gaza Strip, or the houses were demolished, or they were forced to live to the south of the Gaza Strip. And I personally believe that providing any aid that you can provide to the civilians and the population in the Gaza Strip is not enough. I mean, you can provide more food. I mean, it's not something that should be prevented or even count. I mean, that's my personal opinion. The feeling that everything became politics and everybody plays with the other side people. In the same time, the feeling is that both, you can say, governments less cares about the interest of the people, more like okay, local, like the Hamas doesn't look, it doesn't definitely look like the Hamas don't care about his people. And sometimes when you see the Israeli politics, you definitely ask yourself if these politicians care about the Israelis or their own status or situation in the government, or their own political situation. So definitely that also affects decision like aid to the Gaza Strip. That's the feeling I have.
That's a very profound answer. And I hope anybody who's watching this on our video rebroadcast just rewinds a few seconds and listens to that again, because I think what Yoni just said is extremely important. How do you feel about the possibility of Israel finding a way to segregate civilians, disabled, children, obvious non-combatants, and ensure that they are given food and shelter either somewhere in the south of Gaza or even in Israel proper?
Again, I mean, it's very much related to what I said before. I mean, so many times I see that the first one to be affected many times are the poorest people, the more vulnerable people, and this is what we see also in these clashes from both sides, I think. Also, I see it in the West Bank, by the way. Maybe we'll talk about it later on, like who are the people who have been affected directly. Now, let's put it this. I think that we can do. I think that people forgot the idea that we have to eventually to protect the poorest people, the more vulnerable people. And unfortunately, the feeling I have with this war right now, it's to show who can be more brutal, who is more powerful, definitely. Let's say the parameters of this war is not something that I can really understand sometimes, because I'm definitely very much hoping that the Hamas will lose power, or maybe lose all its power, but I see the difference between the people and the government or the militants also. I mean, and I don't think that the government see that or enough, like I said.
Now, what we keep hearing in the news is demands for a ceasefire, demands for a humanitarian pause, or insistence that nothing's going to happen until the hostages are all free. Now, I realize these are military political decisions, and that neither Peace Now nor anybody else can make those decisions. But what are your feelings about them? Ceasefire, humanitarian pause, keep fighting unless all the hostages are freed.
Well, I mean, generally in peace now, we are not like, we don't have let's say, enough military background to say what should be the right military operation and how it should be operated and things like that. But I think that whatever is needed to bring back the hostages should be done. In general, again, ceasefire is, I mean, the reason we are not against ceasefire because not shooting on each other and not killing each other is not something that I can be against it. I mean, like I said before, you can always kill later. Don't worry. We have plenty of time to kill each other later. So I don't really understand why we can prevent ceasefire from time to time. In the same time, I understand there are military experts that saying that this is the time for the cooling for the military operation. I just hope that they know what they're doing. I mean, I think what is missing in all of this is what is the, let's say, what is the priority of the hostages in this military operation? If it's like the first priority or second or third or who knows. And that's what concerns us right now. I'm not sure that the first priority of the Israeli government is like to rescue the hostages.
I'd like to move now a little bit to the West Bank. And there are a lot of questions we have about the West Bank. And the one that has been absolutely on everybody's mind, and if you could sit in on some of our board email interactions, you would just see every couple of minutes this is coming up. We have a horrible situation with settler violence in the West Bank, both before the 7th of October and even worse since the 7th of October. Would you be able to comment on what's going on in the West Bank with this settler violence, with trying to use the crisis to steal more land from the Palestinians, and the shocking death of so many Palestinians at the hands of settlers of late?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, Peace Now published a report about the first week of the war, what happened in the West Bank. It's in our website. And this week, we're going to publish a report about the West Bank during the Gaza war. Like, it's about a month, and the changes we see and the settlers' activities, if it's settlers' violence, but also settlers' involvement in a military decision in the West Bank. And what we wrote in this report, and what I see actually on the field, is since the war, the settlers actually, first of all, like you mentioned, the settlers' violence first of all, I want to say, when we are talking about the settlers, and the majority of the settlers are peaceful people. Okay, they're living in the settlement, but usually, I mean, they are peaceful people going to work in Israel or wherever. They're not involved in grabbing more land or settlers' violence. But among the settlers, there are definitely groups of settlers who are using violence as a tool against the Palestinians. First of all, since the war began, we're talking about almost 15 Palestinian communities that were forced to evacuate it from their land because the settlers threatened them, let's say, sometimes shoot at them. Other events of clashes steal for them the property, burn the property sometimes. I mean, we see a lot of violence from the settlers against Palestinians who are living in Area C. This is the area that's under the Israeli control in the West Bank. And we're talking about 600 Palestinians that had to evacuate from their land since the war began. Next to that, we definitely see more like new outposts, which is like new places that settlers decided to establish during the war. And they're building new roads, all of that illegal. And they're forcing the army to keep the Palestinians in the West Bank in kind of a siege, which means that they are not able to move even in the West Bank from one place to another. What I want to say that in general, we see that the tension in the West Bank is very high. The settlers are not willing they're not letting, let's put this, they're not letting the military forces to deal with the security. They are intervening with the military decision. Sometimes they're preventing for the military to do what they should do. They definitely, there are a lot of clashes against Palestinians, including settlers that killing Palestinians. And the problem with all of these things is not something new. We knew it like before, like you mentioned, Bob. But the problem is that the political level, that the politician in Israel, the government in Israel, is actually not going against it, if not even supporting sometimes this kind of action. And that's, I think the main problem is the settlers are the problems, or the riots is definitely a problem. But if the government would like to prevent it, it's not that complicated. We're talking about a small group of people who's doing a lot of violent actions that can lead to what we are calling a third front, which could happen that we're having like kind of if you want to call it, a new intifada in the West Bank, that we believe that the settlers' violence actually adding to this kind of situation that anyway very much tense. When I'm talking about third front, I mean there's one front in the south, kind of a front in the north with Lebanon, we don't know exactly, and the question what will be with the West Bank. Unfortunately, today the settlers are very violent, and it's very dangerous where it leads us.
Well, that's about as horrible as it could be, but I appreciate the fact that you're giving us a straight answer to that. A lot of people have been blaming the settlers' violence for causing the military in September, essentially, to transfer troops from the Gaza area to the West Bank to protect the people who are provoking violence among the Palestinians, and suggesting that that may be the reason that the settlements in the south were so completely undefended. Do you agree with that?
I think the blame should go to the government again. I'm not. I mean, it's true that the settlers demand a lot of security. The fact that we're having like 300 settlement and outposts spread all over the West Bank near Palestinian villages definitely demand a lot of security, a lot of forces that should be in the West Bank. But I think it's again the priority of the Israeli government for years, not just the last year, that the decision was to put a lot of soldiers and a lot of the effort of the military in the West Bank and abandoned other fronts. And eventually it goes back, according to my understanding, to political decision. The fact that the settlers demands more security, I can understand. I also would like to have more security. The government is supposed to understand what's the ability of the army, what the security people said about what the army can do, and how you protect the different fronts. Definitely, the fact that we're having a pro-settlers government, let's put it this way, didn't help the South Front to be safer. That's the feeling we get. I must say that we cannot, I mean, one of the demands of the settlers is to have more protection, but I want to explain something else. The settlers are very active in the West Bank, especially during the holidays. And there are a lot of tours and a lot of events that have taking place in the West Bank in this particular time. Something else that used to take place in the last few years is a demand of the settlers to visit in a Palestinian villages or cities in the West Bank. For example, it's very popular to do tours to Nablus, it's a Palestinian city, to visit, for example, Joseph Tomb, or what's so-called Joseph Tomb. I'm saying that because that means that the settlers actually forcing the military to have more military to support them to go inside Palestinian cities just for a trip, just for kind of a tour, or like which is ridiculous. And I think to allow things like that is one of the problems that happened. And if we're going again back to what happened in October 7th, we know that about 2 days before, the settlers decided they want to build a sukkah in a Palestinian village called Hawara. So if you want to build a sukkah in a Palestinian village called Hawara, you need security from the army. So what the army did, he took soldiers from the south to protect this kind of event. This is the problem that we're facing, that every wishful thinking that the settlers having, the military to very fast obeyed because of the political support. And I'm going back again, I believe the problem is the political support the government gives to this kind of events.
Now, I could go on like this for the next 20 minutes, but I think that we've building up questions from the audience, so I'm going to ask Tamara if you would take over and let our viewers know what our viewers are asking.
Hello, everyone. I just want to remind you to use the Q&A function. You can type in your questions at any time, as well as we may not be able to get to all of them, and some of them may have sort of been addressed already. So I'll go in order. There was one that was emailed in beforehand, and it is from Michael and Beryl Korber. The question is, are there any hints that Hamas may be willing to enter into a peace deal with Israel?
Well, I don't know about this kind of hints of a peace deal. The feeling in Israel is that the Hamas is there's no way that Israel can do a peace deal with the Hamas, because the feeling is that the peace with Hamas means no Israel. That's the feeling, that understanding we're having, very clearly understanding. The Hamas is not a partner for peace. Sometimes it confuses people that thinking that if Hamas is not partner for peace, there is no partner for peace. But actually, I strongly believe the Palestinians are partners for peace, but the Hamas is eventually a religious military organization that his agenda cannot meet any compromise with the existence of Israel, and we Zionists definitely believe in our. So I don't think the Hamas is an option, and that's the situation today.
This is a question on a similar topic, and it is from David Goldfield, who is present today. And he asked if Netanyahu has to go for any chance of long-term peace.
The feeling in the public, I mean, Netanyahu definitely failed. I mean, that's very clear that he failed. His policy failed for years with supporting the Hamas. Again, we are in peace now, or in the Israeli, let's say in the peace camp, definitely think that that Netanyahu should go many years ago. But again, everybody talks about who should go, like if the Hamas should go, if Netanyahu should go, and I want to say who should come in, and that's very important, because I think what we need is like a government that be able to promote the life of the Israelis and the Palestinians here. And that's something that we didn't have in the last 15 years as we saw in October 7, which means that eventually we need a government that capable to promote a political solution and a better life for Israelis and the Palestinians. And I'm saying that because we see that Netanyahu, even in the last few days, is still very much going against this agenda. For example, last week, the Knesset or the government decided to appoint Knesset member, his name is Tzvi Sukkot, from the very far right, to be the head of the security committee in the Knesset, responsible to what's happening in the West Bank. And we see that until the last minute, Netanyahu is still keeping his extreme right-wing parties in the coalition. So it's definitely in this kind of situation, we think that it's not just Netanyahu that should go, that all this agenda of the extreme right parties, they should leave the government, and I don't understand how they can lead this military operation, by the way, and definitely not the day after, which is maybe even more important.
Thank you. One question from Anonymous is, who do you see as your partners these days, especially after the massacre on the October 7th? And the second part is, how reliable is the left, whether in Israel or in the diaspora?
So if it's okay, I will say something from personal perspective. Like I'm kind of an activist for maybe 20 years, maybe more. Doesn't matter. And actually more. Anyway, but and I met a lot of Palestinians, and one of the things I noticed is that you see all kind of Palestinian leaders, and during these 20 and more years, I looked at all kind of Palestinians and thought, this guy, he could be a Palestinian leader. This guy could be a Palestinian leader. This woman could be a Palestinian leader. And I saw how the Israeli authorities, if it is security authorities and other securities, working very hard to prevent from these leaders to remain leaders. Like Israel worked very hard, not just to make the Hamas very powerful, but also to raise any kind of level of leadership that the Palestinians tried to start to build. And after 20 years, that after Israel did a very good job by helping the Hamas to be what it is and preventing from any other leadership to be built, people ask about potential leaders. And I want to say that I know that it sounds maybe cool, but we are paying the price of not building or not helping the Palestinians to build their leadership. Even if you're looking at the level of the Palestinian Authority, again, even in the last few days, still the government thinks about how to make the Palestinian Authority weaker and weaker. So if you, I think there are a lot of people in the Palestinian public that have the ability to build. They are very much even appreciated, very much recognized by local communities, but still it definitely will take time to strengthen the Palestinian community in general and the Palestinian leaders. But I want to say still, I know maybe it sounds naive, I don't know, but I still believe that most of the Palestinians, definitely in the West Bank, which I'm more familiar, West Bank and East Jerusalem, I'm less familiar with Gaza Strip, are people who people who want to live here. Eventually, they want to live here. They want a life of a peace in one way or another. It just depends if Israel will reach this hand for peace and will support it, I think.
This leads nicely into a question from Shelley Corin. From Dr. Alexander Lowengarov. And it's from your conversations with Palestinians and Israeli Arabs. Do you feel that they subscribe to the same goal of ending Hamas's rule and capabilities, something which all Jewish Israelis appear to want?
I'm not the spokesperson of the Palestinians, just my, like the question said, it's just my impression. The goal of the Palestinians is not to be killed. Okay, I want to say something about the situation of the Palestinians today in Gaza Strip, as I understand, but they're mainly in the West Bank. You have to understand that there's it's almost a month that the Palestinians cannot leave their villages. Okay, they cannot leave their cities, and even if they are not in favor of what the Hamas did, their concern is not if the Hamas will be destroyed or not. The concern is if their life as Palestinians will be developed and will be promoted or not. The question that the West and maybe the Israelis asking if we can eliminate the Hamas or not, it's one thing. Eventually the Hamas is one of the parties, very powerful party in the Palestinian public. Probably the idea will not disappear, even if all the militants will be killed. So they don't have this expectation. They just in this the talks that I have with the Palestinians, that they are very much concerned about what's happening in Gaza Strip and very much concerned about what will happen in the West Bank. So when you have this kind of survival situation or instinct, like you are in survival instinct, you can less think about what happened with the Hamas, if it will remain or not.
Thank you. This is a question from Max B. Please tell us your thoughts about the Bennett plan, either points either considering or requiring rejection of it.
The Bennett plan?
That's all I have.
I don't know what is the Bennett plan. I know that if it's the Bennett plan, is the right-wing plan, which is like, if it's what it's meant back then, that Bennett suggested to annex Area C and things like that, if that's what we are talking about. Listen, all these plans, I don't believe there's a political solution without having a proper Palestinian state. And Bennett plan or Smotrich plan, all these plans that the Palestinians will live only in the cities where they're living today, in 40% of the West Bank, I don't think it's realistic. I don't think it can last for long. And again, I'm from Peace Now, so maybe I might sound biased, but I definitely think that the only solution is, listen, the only solution for people the Israelis and the Israeli supporters have to understand that the only solution for Israel is the two-state solution. It's not a solution for the Palestinians. It's just Israeli solution. In the long term, I don't see any other solution for Israel. And you cannot really go back to the West Bank and divide it and say, no, this part of the West Bank we give and this part or not. Eventually, the Palestinians should have like a proper state.
And I'm combining a couple questions from audience members. What can we do to try to prevent the extremism or to combat it, either as individuals in the diaspora or with Shalom Achshav, as well as to try to encourage a two-state solution?
Thank you. This is very, very, very important question, I think, because then I hear it a lot, and I always also I'm thinking about what can we do. And I think that one of the things that, at least from the Israeli perspective, one of the mistakes that we the Israelis did is that we were in some way even indifferent to the settlement process in general. Like, we were indifferent to the fact that the settlements are growing. We were indifferent to the fact that there's more settlers violent. We could say, okay, we're living our life, like comfortable life in Israel, and we were less concerned about what's happening in the West Bank, although we were very much against it. And I think that the conclusion I have from October 7 is that we cannot remain kind of indifferent to what's happening to the Palestinians or what's happening in the West Bank by the settlers in general. I mean, we don't have more time to wait to a political solution and to say, okay, we have, what I want to say is that we have to raise our voice louder in the demand to the two-state solution. Many years we had the feeling that the settlers are the one who raising the voice for more settlement, more support, more legitimation and things like that. And we said, okay, the time will come. So first of all, I think that we have to raise our voice much more louder and to be very clear about it. And it means that, again, maybe it's not practical, maybe it's very general, but to understand that in our actions, always to consider how we're really promoting the two-state solution, like in all kind of small things that we're doing. If we're visiting Israel, where we're visiting in Israel, are we going to the West Bank or not? And now I don't have like a concrete plan what should be done, but and maybe now during the war it's a bit difficult. But I think that the most important thing is to raise the voice that there's no black and white. There's no bad Israel or bad Hamas. I mean, Hamas actually I do see it as bad, but there's no bad Israel and no bad Palestinians. When I'm saying no bad Hamas, you have to understand that some of the people definitely depend on the Hamas welfare system, by the way. It's something that we have to remember that among the Palestinians. So I'm saying that eventually it's not black and white. And we have to keep these voices, because at least the feeling that we're having from Israel, that there are a lot of voices anti-Israelis, like Israel is doing massacre or whatever they're doing, genocide, I hear, in Gaza Strip, which is obviously not true. And it obviously don't see the situation, how the Israelis feel that. And at the same time, I don't think the whole Palestinians wants to kill all the Israelis. I'm sure they're not, by the way. So that's also a narrative that should be. So I think that we're very much important to be against anything that is like black and white in these cases.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Shelley, Corin, I am getting to your question now. I know I previewed it. So more about what we can do. How can we call for a return of the hostages, especially if it does not mean a prisoner swap of major size? And then I assume we being, or they, the Israeli government or military, ignoring the number of soldiers who would have to die to take the hostages out?
Listen, I think the hostages can go back home only in a deal, most of them. And the demand, according to my understanding, should be that it's very difficult. It's very difficult because there is an obvious demand to fight the Hamas, which I understand. I also would like to fight the Hamas. I would like the Hamas will no longer exist. I think he's dangerous to everybody here, also to the Palestinians, by the way. But it's definitely dangerous for Israel. But in the same time, if we want a deal, it means that our call in the priority of this war or military operation will be, first of all, demand from the Israeli government, do everything you can do to rescue the hostages. Because now the voices are also going, keep fighting. So it's a very difficult statement to come and say, what is your first priority here? Because, but we must, we must force the politicians that the first agenda that they're having will be to rescue the hostages. Even today, when you hear Netanyahu and you hear others, he's not mentioning the rescue of the rescue of the hostages as the first priority. And I think, first of all, that should be the first priority and the first, like in the top of any discourse when it comes to this. And from public pressure, I hope that it will reach to both sides, Israelis and Palestinians, and then we can reach a deal.
This is a question from Marlene Riviere. With Israelis being evacuated from the south and north, is there any initiative or call to evacuate settlers in order to focus the IDF elsewhere?
It's a good question, because obviously the only thing that I saw is that some few people said that, okay, if we're able to evacuate the 200 people in a few days, so we're definitely able to evacuate 200,000 people in a few days, so we're definitely able to evacuate 200,000 settlers in a few days as well. This call was not heard. It was not really a public call. The feeling now is that it sounded too radical. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it sounds a bit radical to call it now. But we're definitely hearing a lot of voices, also in the mainstream television and the mainstream discourse, about the fact that we need to reach to a political solution in the West Bank. People understand, definitely the expert, but also other, that what happened in the West Bank until now can no longer exist. And that means that we need the government to do that, and probably not this government. But I'm not sure we're talking about during the war, but definitely in the next few years, that's something that we have to address.
I got some clarification about the Bennett plan. So it's regarding to Gaza. He's suggesting extending the area around Gaza, serving as a sort of no persons or no man's land, which would give the IDF more room for maneuver, as well as a safe haven for, and then there's typos, so I think for civilian Gaza.
Yeah, no, I know. This is also, it's also Barak plan, okay. Yeah.
Do you have any
yeah, there are some military experts that suggested to have like a buffer zone, and then the discussion is what will be the size of the buffer zone. And again, there's a question. I mean, if you have a buffer zone, so you have more, the Palestinians have more legitimation kind of to attack you, but maybe they anyway will attack you. Listen, the long-term solution, I don't know, maybe for short-term solution, it's an option, I don't know, but it's obviously the long-term solution, what we very clearly understand after October 7, it doesn't matter what kind of a barrier you would put, if it would be deep in the ground, high in the sky, or wide on the land, the solution cannot be exclusively military solution. We must have a strong military in Israel, obviously, but it cannot last only based on a military solution. And if Bennett's solution is only military solution, so we'll probably wait to another event that will happen again in a few years. In this scale, what happened now. So again, military solution is not a solution for me. I'm sorry to say, I mean, it could be a beginning of a solution, but eventually we have to reach to a political solution. People who are avoiding talking about political solution are leading us to continuing the cycles of war. That's what we have to understand.
This question is from Anonymous, and they were wondering how knowledgeable or experienced Gazan Palestinians are with the details and nuances of life for Arabs in Israel.
Very little. In short, the Gazan people know very little about what's happening in Israel. I think even very little, maybe they know a bit more about what's happening in the West Bank, but listen, the Gazan people, eventually they are isolated for 16 years. Depending, okay, now you have the social media and other kind of channels to get information, but eventually they are very limited with their knowledge. They definitely don't go out. And if you are having like 16 years of Hamas regime, so you hear only specific things and your knowledge is very limited. Yes. That's in general the situation for everything.
Carol Libman asked, what are the chances of a less right-wing government replacing Netanyahu at the next election?
Personally, I don't believe Netanyahu will last for long. I don't see in this situation that he's lasting long with all the respect. And I do hear, I'm living in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a very right-wing city, and still I having the feeling that even here people realize that Netanyahu can no longer be the prime minister. It doesn't mean that the right wing will not continue ruling. That's a good comment. I think, again, I think that it might take a while, but every new I don't think this government will last for long, but I think every new government eventually will have to address the problem in the West Bank and to find not only military solution to the Israeli problems. I mean, we definitely understand that cannot last forever. How long it will take, I don't know, but I mean, I don't see Netanyahu and Smotrich doing that, but maybe more kind of a central government can do that, maybe Gantz and Lapid and others. Yeah.
So we have a couple more questions. And for those of us watching from home, we may be able to extend this conversation for another about 15 minutes. So I just wanted to let you know that. So if you have some last questions, please put it in the chat. This is from Max B. What are some opinions in Israel and in Palestine with regards to normalization with Saudi Arabia at this point? And do they think that it would make any difference?
It's a good question. I mean, Israelis definitely support normalization with Saudi Arabia. I mean, we definitely would like. Israel is always pro-peace, especially when it doesn't go with giving land, you know, like without giving back the territories. I think that, so normalization with Saudi Arabia is definitely a good thing, but again, for my personal opinion, I mean, the question was about the Israeli public. I just said that for my personal opinion is definitely, I mean, the peace can last with the Arab states only if you have also peace with the Palestinians, as we saw in October 7th. So the Israeli public very much for it. It sounds like no risk peace solution, although it's not really peace, it's a normalization agreement. Again, but in the same time, we see that we had the peace with the Emirates and others that when the war began, suddenly, everybody was afraid again. So like I said, I think it's all linked, although it's definitely important. Yeah.
I just want to clarify, please write questions in the Q&A feature, not in the chat. I actually can't see the chat. This question is from Jacqueline Swartz, and it is about your experience with archaeology. And she was wondering that after taking your Emek Sheva tour of Jerusalem, she said this, so she took the tour. What state is the weaponization of archaeology? Or what is this weaponization of archaeology in what state?
Until October 6th, we saw increasing of the use of archaeology as a political tool in the West Bank. If I'm going back again, so the settlers used to demand all kind of archaeological sites, some of them really not important, demanding from the state to protect them, all kind of archaeological sites in area A and B, demanding the expansion of the military presence in the West Bank in the name of the archaeology. There is a plan actually to invest a lot of money in archaeological sites in the West Bank in order to bring more Israelis, and actually in this way kind of to Judaize the West Bank. So it's a very important tool for the settlers to justify the West Bank present and to justify and to bring Israelis in the West Bank, although if they're not living there. Now everything changed. I don't know what will be after the war. It's a tool that is very dominant also in Jerusalem. I think that Israel also have to change the discourse regards to the archaeology, the way that we treat archaeology. What is like Israel very much in favor of emphasizing the Jewish history, but there's also other history in this land. So this is also something that should be explained. It used to be it's still very powerful tool. Now we are in time of war, so the archaeology is a bit silenced, but let's see what will be after the war, how the struggle over the West Bank, how archaeology will be used as a weapon by the settlers.
Before we get to our last question, I will pass the mic over to Bob.
Thanks. I'm going to do my fundraising pitch again. It's really important that we're able to fund Peace Now, Shalom Mashav in Israel, and most especially the Settlement Watch, which I am convinced has a critical role to play in peace building. So anybody who's interested in long-term peace, please consider making a donation, and I can assure you it will go to the good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. And this is a question from Gabriella Goliger. And she was wondering if support for extremism on both Palestinian and Israeli side has grown, if the peace camp has become more marginalized, and if you have any details as to what activities Shalom Achshav is currently undertaking.
Well, the extremism is definitely the issue. I mean, in both sides, I think it's they definitely grow in the last 15 years, like that, as we saw. In peace now, we're very much trying to expand the peace camp in Israel. We usually point out the problem of the extremist as the one who are actually leading us to the next military circle, whatever we are facing. I mean, it's part of the discourse in peace now, because we're trying to say that these extremists, they are minority. Definitely the Israelis are minority extremists. I mean, there are only small groups among them. I'm not talking about the settlers, I'm talking about the extremists among the settlers. I guess that's the question related. And we're definitely emphasizing them as a problem to the stability for everybody in this area. We don't have like a direct campaigns against them, or campaign or project against the extremists in general. Now we are more trying to organize the peace camp together and to think how to reach to the public in order to understand or to raise the voice of political solution. The next voice is obviously fight the extremism. Like, it's not our first statement, but it's definitely the second one. I can say for that if there's something that regarded to the previous question about what can be done, I think that not accepting extremism and raise the voice against extremism is definitely very important. I hope the Palestinians will do the same against the extremists they having, which is the Hamas, obviously. And I think that these voices should be heard much more among the Israelis and the Palestinians in order to reach any political solution. Otherwise, they will beat us, and that's not a good option.
Thank you very much. I really appreciated your taking the time for us today. For those of you who are watching, we are looking forward to a number more interesting, exciting, terrifying webinars in the future as we see what develops. And we really are feeling that in the long term, there is really only one possible solution, and that is a peaceful two-state solution. And thank you very much, Yoni, for stressing that for us. Thank you, Tamara.
Thank you very much.
And in the background, thank you to Lisa Black, who's been making this whole Zooms thing work. Good night. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, of course. Good luck.